Marriage is a concept they pitch as a beautiful union. A promise that love conquers all, that hard work will see you through the roughest of storms, and that your soulmate is out there, waiting to complete you. For the first few years of my marriage, I was foolish enough to buy into that narrative. I treated Linda, my wife, like the center of my world, the very heart of every decision I made. And how did that work out for me? Well, here I am, sitting alone in my car, staring at the papers that sealed the end of the circus I once called a marriage. The betrayal, though painful, wasn't the hardest part. It was the crushing realization that, despite everything I gave, it was all for nothing. I poured my heart into this marriage, celebrating every anniversary, picking out thoughtful birthday gifts, making her laugh, learning how to cook, not because I enjoyed it, but because she mentioned once that she would love it if I did. When I say I put her first, I mean it. I didn't just clear the bar. I built her a pedestal and placed her on it. And yet here I am, single again, wondering why. Because, in the end, it's nearly impossible to compete with the thrill of something new when your wife thrives on the excitement of being rescued. Linda wasn't new to this game. I knew she'd been married before, but I thought her first husband had been the villain in her story. He had treated her as a possession, ignored her needs, and didn't even bother to be intimate with her. In my mind, I was the knight in shining armor, rescuing her from a life of misery. But that's the thing about playing the hero. You never realize until it's too late that in real life, heroes don't always win. Villains make the rules. Let's rewind a bit. Picture me now, parked outside a bar 2 blocks from what used to be our home, contemplating what I had just signed away. I wasn't there to wallow in whiskey and self-pity. Well, not entirely. I had another mission. My marriage may have been over, but I wasn't going to walk away quietly. Linda's new knight in shining armor, a guy named Matt, was about to get a reality check. According to the private investigator's notes, Matt was the type of guy who loved his routine. And his routine was about to lead him straight into my little trap. Sure enough, I spotted his car, a flashy gray BMW that screamed overcompensating, pulling up next to my midnight blue Mustang. We both stepped out of our cars at the same time. Matt was in his late 30s, maybe a few years younger than me. He had that smug grin, the kind that only comes from someone who thinks they've just hit the jackpot. "Nice ride," he said, nodding toward my Mustang. "Thanks," I replied, "yours too." "Let me guess," he continued, "today's been a good day?" "The best day of my life," Matt said, his grin widening. "Finally made a clean break from something that's been weighing me down. Feels like I can finally breathe again." I nodded, suppressing the urge to laugh. "That does sound like something worth drinking to." We walked into the bar together, as if we were old friends. He had no idea who I was. No idea that I knew every sordid detail about his affair with my wife. He didn't know that his life was about to veer sharply off course. We grabbed a table in the back, and I waved over the bartender. "2 whiskeys," I said, "it's on me. Call it a welcome drink." Matt raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "You seem in a good mood. What are you celebrating?" "Insurance," I said cryptically. "Actually, you might be able to help me with something." "Nothing complicated." He leaned in, curious. "What kind of help?" "I just need a witness for something," I said nonchalantly. "Won't cost you anything." "Hell, I'll even keep buying the drinks." Matt leaned back in his chair, clearly intrigued. "All right, I'm listening." Before long, a man with a laptop joined us at the table. He looked like your typical office drone. Cheap tie, weary expression, the kind of guy who hated his job. He set up his equipment and began hooking me up to the polygraph machine. Matt, now growing more suspicious, leaned forward. "What's this about?" "Polygraph test," I said casually. "I work for a company that requires routine screenings. Helps keep things above board, you know." Matt blinked, clearly taken aback. "You're doing this here at a bar?" Shrug. "Convenience. If you witness the test, it's legit. That's all the company cares about." It was a ridiculous setup, but Matt didn't question it. The examiner attached the leads to my wrists and temples, and the laptop flickered to life, displaying jagged lines pulsing in sync with my heartbeat. "All right, Ed," the examiner said, addressing me by the fake name I'd given. You know the drill. Yes or no answers only. The questions started innocently enough. Have you been truthful on all your expense reports? Yes, I answered. Have you ever stolen from the company? No. Matt leaned in, watching the lines on the screen dance with each response, captivated like a kid watching a magic trick. Have you ever cheated on your wife? The examiner asked. Not once. No, I said, keeping my voice steady. Matt's eyes flickered toward me. I caught a brief flash of admiration, and then a realization. The irony of it all didn't escape me. The man who thought he had won was about to discover that the truth was far more complicated than he could ever imagine. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. After the test concluded, the examiner handed Matt a form to sign as a witness. He scribbled his name without a second thought, likely thinking it was just part of the corporate protocol. We ordered another round of drinks, and I sensed the time had come to shift gears. You know, I said, swirling my whiskey, my voice casual yet deliberate. I heard you say earlier that you made a clean break. Mind if I ask what that was all about? Matt hesitated for just a moment, but then a smile spread across his face, clearly eager to boast. It's kind of a long story. Let's just say I finally found someone who makes me happy. Someone who understands me. That's great, I said, nodding, my tone sincere but measured. You deserve that. Thanks, he replied, his expression softening. It's been a rough few months, but it's all worth it now. I'm finally with the woman I was meant to be with. She sounds incredible, I remarked, keeping my tone light and unassuming. What's her name? Matt paused, his eyes darting briefly before he answered, his voice softening with affection. Linda. I couldn't help but smirk, letting her name roll off my tongue like a bad joke. Linda. I repeated, the word dripping with mock amusement. What a small world. Matt froze, his eyes narrowing in confusion. What do you mean? He asked, a trace of unease creeping into his voice. I leaned in, locking eyes with him, savoring the moment. Because I know her, I said calmly. Intimately. Matt's face drained of color. He blinked rapidly, clearly struggling to process what I had just said. What the hell do you mean you know her? His voice was a mix of confusion and growing discomfort. I took a slow sip of my whiskey, feeling the warmth spread through me as I let the words land. Exactly what it sounds like, I said, a dark grin creeping across my face. Linda and I have a bit of history. 7 years of it, to be exact. I was husband number 4, Matt. I leaned back in my chair, enjoying the shift in his demeanor. I guess that makes you number 5. Congratulations, buddy. You've really moved up in the rankings. Matt sat frozen, his mouth working but no words coming out. I could see the blood drain from his face as the reality of my words sank in. I'll give you this, I continued, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You've got a type. Linda sure knows how to pick her knights in shining armor. You've ridden in on your white horse, all ready to save the damsel in distress, right? I let the words hang in the air before continuing. She told you all about her monster of a husband, didn't she? Let me guess, he was controlling, maybe abusive. Didn't give her the attention she deserved. Matt's eyes darted nervously around the bar as though he were looking for an escape route. I chuckled darkly. Relax. You don't have to answer. I already know the script. She ran the same play on me on husband number 3 and probably number 2 too. I'm guessing number 1 got the same treatment, though I never had the pleasure of meeting him. Finally, Matt found his voice. You're lying, he snapped, though his tone was more desperate than convincing. I pulled out my wallet and slid a photo across the table, placing it in front of him. It was from our honeymoon. A moment frozen in time, Linda and I on a beach in Maui, smiling, sunglasses on, looking like a couple with the world at their feet. His eyes widened as he stared at the photo, and the color drained further from his face. Holy, he muttered. Yeah, I said, taking another sip of my whiskey. She's good, isn't she? Almost had me convinced I was her one and only. But here's the thing, Matt. Linda's not looking for forever. She's looking for the next thrill. Right now that's you. But give it time. A year, maybe 2. And one day you'll start noticing the distance. The excuses. The way she looks at other men when she thinks you're not paying attention. Matt pushed the photo back toward me, his hand trembling. Why are you telling me this? Because someone should have told me, I replied, my voice matter of fact. Maybe it wouldn't have stopped me, but at least I would have gone into it with my eyes open. Besides, you seem like a decent guy. You don't deserve what's coming. He looked physically ill, the realization starting to sink in. So what, you're saying she's just using me? I shrugged casually. Not entirely. I'm sure she likes you. Hell, maybe she even loves you, at least in her own way. But Linda doesn't do forever, Matt. She does right now. And when right now stops being exciting, she'll move on. You'll go from being her savior to being her monster. It's just a matter of time. I could see the cracks beginning to form in the image he had built of her. His mind was turning, processing the possibility that everything he thought he knew about Linda might just be a lie. Let me give you some advice, I said, leaning in slightly. First, don't marry her without a prenup. Make sure it's ironclad. No alimony, no assets, nothing. Second, I paused, letting the weight of my words settle in. Second, enjoy it while it lasts. The sex, the romance, the way she makes you feel like you're the center of her universe. Because once it's gone, it's gone. Matt stared at me. His expression a mixture of anger, disbelief, and something darker, fear. You're full of shit, he muttered finally, though there was little conviction in his voice. Maybe, I said, standing up. But you're here, sitting in this bar, listening to a stranger tell you the truth about your perfect relationship. That's gotta sting. I tossed a few bills onto the table to cover our drinks and turned toward the door, walking away with a quiet satisfaction, leaving him to wrestle with the truth I had just dropped in his lap. I reached the door, turned back with a smirk, and called out, "Good luck, Matt. You're going to need it." The words slipped out like a cold promise. As I spent the rest of the evening at home, there was a strange sense of peace settling over me. Not happiness. No, happiness was still distant, just beyond my grasp, but a quiet kind of closure. For the first time in weeks, my mind wasn't spinning with endless thoughts of what went wrong. I had handed Matt a roadmap of his future, and if he was smart, he'd take the next exit off the highway to hell before he ended up like me. But somehow I knew he wouldn't. People like Matt, people like me, always think they're different. I had just finished cleaning up after dinner when there came a knock at the door. Not a polite tap, but an insistent, impatient pounding. I already knew who it was before I even glanced through the peephole. Linda. She stood there, arms crossed, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently against her biceps. Her look was a carefully crafted blend of indignation and desperation, and her tight, figure-hugging dress and flawless makeup made her seem like she had just stepped out of a shampoo commercial. It was the "I'm too hot to ignore" look she always deployed when she wanted something. I opened the door but didn't step aside. "What do you want, Linda?" "My key doesn't work," she said, brushing past me like she still owned the place. "What's that smell? Did you cook?" "Your key doesn't work because I changed the locks," I replied, shutting the door behind me. "And yes, I cooked for myself." She whirled around, disbelief written all over her face. "You changed the locks? What the hell, Ed? I thought you'd at least fight for me." I let out a bitter laugh, sharp and cutting. "Fight for you? Linda, you filed for divorce, remember? Signed the papers this morning. You don't get to throw me away and then come back like nothing happened." She stepped forward, her voice softening as she looked up at me with watery eyes. "It was a mistake," she whispered. "I didn't know what I wanted, but now I do. Sue it. It's always been you." I raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "Oh really? Because last I checked, you were shacking up with Matt. How's that working out for you?" Her face twisted with annoyance, the tears evaporating as quickly as they had come. "Matt was just a distraction. I needed to figure out if we were really meant to be. But now I know we are." I stared at her for a long moment. "Wow," I said, crossing my arms. You've really got this gaslighting thing down to a science, don't you? She ignored my jab and took another step toward me, placing her hands on my chest. Come on, baby, she purred. Let's stop all this nonsense. I'll move my stuff back in tonight. We can go upstairs, reconnect. Her fingers trailed down my chest, and for a split second, I felt the old pull of her charm. But then reality came crashing back, and I stepped away. Nice try, Linda, I said, shaking my head. But I'm not falling for it. You burned this bridge, and I'm not rebuilding it for you. Her eyes narrowed, the sweet mask slipping to reveal the anger underneath. You're really going to throw everything we had away? After everything I've done for you? Done for me? I scoffed, crossing my arms. You mean like cheating? Filing for divorce? Or maybe it was the part where you lied to me for God knows how long. She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. Look, Linda, I don't care why you're here. Maybe Matt kicked you to the curb, or maybe you're just bored. Whatever the reason, you're not staying. Take your little power play somewhere else. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but before she could speak, I continued. Take your stuff, what little of it you didn't already pack, into that overpriced SUV and leave. If you want to drag this out legally, that's fine. But the papers are signed, and I'm not undoing that. She sneered at me, her usual manipulative charm failing spectacularly. You think you're so high and mighty now, don't you? Acting like you're better than me. I don't have to act, Linda, I grinned. But I can tell that one stung. She wasn't done yet. Linda wasn't the type to leave without trying one last Hail Mary play. You know what, Ed? You think you've won, but you haven't. You'll come crawling back to me once you realize what you've lost. Lost? I repeated, laughing bitterly. The only thing I've lost is 130 pounds of lies, drama, and betrayal. And I'm not exactly mourning the weight loss. Her face turned crimson, and for a moment I thought she might lunge at me. Instead, she stormed toward the front door. This isn't over, she spat, throwing the words over her shoulder. Oh, yes it is, I called after her, opening the door and gesturing toward the driveway. But as she stepped outside, I wasn't quite finished. Not yet. I followed her onto the porch. Oh, Linda, I called, just before she could disappear into the night. She stopped and turned, glaring at me, and I could see the confusion mixed with curiosity in her eyes. I almost forgot, I said, my voice dripping with mock sincerity. You left something behind. Her expression shifted. What are you talking about? I grinned, the satisfaction bubbling up in my chest. The dignity you traded for a quick fling. But don't worry, it's not here anymore. I threw it out with the garbage. Her jaw dropped, but before she could retort, I turned and went back inside, closing the door behind me. I heard her pounding on the door again, her voice shrill with obscenities, but I didn't even glance toward it. A few minutes later, the sound of her SUV roaring down the driveway confirmed she had finally left. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a cold beer from the fridge, and stepped out onto the back deck. The fire pit still glowed softly from earlier, and I took a deep breath, savoring the crisp night air. For the first time in years I felt free. Linda had tried her best to drag me back into her chaos, but I wasn't that guy anymore. The one who bent over backward for someone who didn't deserve it. The guy who ignored every red flag, just to believe in some version of happily ever after. As I sat there, the cold beer in my hand and the flickering light of the fire dancing in the night, I realized something important. The world didn't end when Linda walked out of my life. It was just beginning.